The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our How to Plan Projects and Resources in NAV Without Moving Data to MS Project webinar. I'm Michael Introvertol, the Marketing Manager for Solution Systems, Inc. And today we're very fortunate to have Dr. Martin Karlowicz with us from NETRONIC. He's going to be conducting this overview. So I'm going to pass it on over to him, and he can tell you more about the wonderful products that he has to offer.
Okay, good afternoon also, everybody. Thanks, Michael, for doing the introduction and for giving me the opportunity to discuss how to schedule jobs visually in Dynamics NAV in an integrated way without moving data to outside of NAV to Microsoft Project, which seems to have been, well, not a best practice, but a common practice in the past. So maybe we can use today's webinar to show you a best practice of how to deal with jobs and resources in NAV. So the content of the session is I want to quickly talk a little bit about the why we feel that dealing with jobs and jobs data in a visual way is relevant for you guys. Then I want to talk a couple of minutes about the what. So what do we understand when we talk about visual job scheduling for Dynamics NAV? And then the majority of today's time should be used to talk about the how. So how we're going to achieve a visual job scheduling in NAV. And so this is the visual part, the demo part of this webinar. So let's talk a little bit about myself and about us as a company. So my name is Martin Karlowicz, and I'm Managing Director of NETRONIC Software. We're a German software company based in Aachen, which is in the western part of Germany. We're actually quite old company. We've been founded in 1975, and since then have been specialized on developing software to build interactive planning diagrams. Our core focus, at least for the last 25 years, had been developing software to visualize Gantt charts. We're slightly more than 20 employees, and the way of how we do our business is in a very product-centric way. So our kind of revenue and business mix is that we do the majority of our business as software licenses and maintenance revenue, and we have some service business, but which is only a minor degree or minor share of the entire business. And this kind of the fact that we have been focusing on one specific product category and the fact that we're doing a product business had enabled us to actually become an international company. So although we are pretty small and although we are all based here in Germany, we do more than half of our business outside of Germany. And with outside of Germany, I not only mean the surrounding European countries, but we do roughly a quarter of the business in the United States. And depending on the economic climate, around 10 to 15% in Southeast Asia. So we are really an international player, although we are small, and this has to do with the way of we do business and of the fact that we are very, very focused on one specific topic. And this is kind of the good old Gantt chart. And the good old Gantt chart kind of has been declared dead so many times that sometimes we are surprised that it is not only alive yet, but that the demand for Gantt charts and for a visual representation of planning and scheduling data seems to be ever increasing. And there are a couple of trends that I don't want to talk too long about it because we are all familiar with them, that actually kind of have driven an increasing demand for the proposition that we have in the last couple of years, and that kind of built a very favorite environment for us. So we all know about data growth, and data growth obviously lead to the fact that kind of conventional databases and tables have become too complex for decision support and for making profound decisions. And we see this in Dynamics NAV, where we have all our jobs data, all our job planning lines, the job tasks, all resource information just in tables. We don't have them visually represented, and this kind of can become a barrier to an agile decision making, and that have led folks in the past to move data out of NAV into MS Project. And we can talk about a little later how we can deal with these kind of data in a smarter way. We also see that decision cycles become shorter and shorter. So people who have to make decisions in enterprises, they have shorter time frames to make these decisions, which means they need the information faster, and typically because data is growing, they need to have more information at one glance. And last but not least, also we see that kind of the authority to make decisions had been pushed down dramatically in the organizational hierarchies, which means that actually planning and decision making have been pretty much decentralized in the last kind of 5 to 10 years, and what had been a kind of strategic functions associated with the headquarters of corporation have really become operational functions in many operational field units. And so whenever in the past corporations could do with having a few planners on a centralized position, now virtually everybody has to do some planning exercises, and also some planning exercises dealing with time-related, resource-oriented data. But not everybody is trained to be a planner, and so the majority of the people that now are tasked to do planning as a piece of their work, they request intuitive tools. And obviously all these trends, and we have seen this in many presentations and discussions and publications in the past, all of these trends had an obvious impact, and that was the boom and is the boom of the business intelligence tools. However, the business intelligence tools, they have kind of a fundamental differentiation, a difference to what we do, which is the Gantt chart, because business intelligence tools help you with analytics, and they help you with analytics in a very great way, but they are kind of one-way communication between you as a user and the data, because data remains unchanged. You can drill down into the data, you can slice and dice into the data, but you cannot change the data. You just look at data as is. And so the hidden impact of all these trends is that what we see, what we call the renaissance of the Gantt chart, because in such an environment with many customers we talk to, we really see that the processes of analytics and decision making, they merge, and likewise the planning and the decision making processes merge, and people have the requirement that data really becomes interactive. People want to do what if scenarios, people want to deal with the data, change data, make decisions, and see the decisions immediately reflected in the data. And this is kind of where the interactive Gantt chart, which we provide and which we provide for Dynamics NAV and for various functions in Dynamic NAV, come into play. And there, what we have seen that in this scenario that I described and in the environment we have today, the Gantt chart, good old Gantt chart, has kind of got a new business value. Of course, it delivers the information value that you get all decision relevant information at one glance, but it also gives you a decision value, because with seeing all the information, you can make better decisions, you can better utilize your resources, which means you have less tied up working capital. You also allocate the time of your people better, so the people are more satisfied, and if you're able to deliver a job on time, then this increases the customer satisfaction. So all in all, the capability of a Gantt chart that you can interact with your planning data should translate into you gaining operational agility. And this is really what we are looking at today with building software that that helps creating interactive Gantt chart. We really want to provide new level of operational agility to our customers. And so, as I said earlier, initially, we have been dealing with Gantt charts and Gantt chart software for the last 20 years. Our bread and butter business had been to developing our product as a tool that we had been selling to software developers, and we enabled these software developers to build interactive Gantt charts. One of our customers actually is Microsoft, who bought the product for an old version of Dynamics NAV and who also bought the same product, which is called Varchart X Gantt, for Dynamics AX, and they still use it in Dynamics AX in various modules. And with our product, and this is more than 10 years ago actually, they built a graphical representation of the production schedule in Dynamics NAV in the classic client version. So up to version 5 of Dynamics NAV, a production scheduler was part of the standard delivery of Dynamics NAV, and this was built on our technology. Microsoft never used it actually to build a Gantt chart for project or for jobs data, and they never used it to build Gantt chart for service and resource data. And Microsoft came out with the role-tailored client versions that most of you, I would suppose, consider using or use today or consider upgrading from an old version. Microsoft invested significantly in the technology, but with significantly changing the technology, the architecture, introducing the role-tailored concept, they also kind of took out external parts to the product. And so they took out this graphical representation of the production schedule for NAV. And this offered an opportunity for us because we have all the tools here in-house, and we have building tools the last 20 years to build interactive Gantt charts. So we as a company decided to invest into building NAV expertise and become what is called an independent software vendor, so an ISV to Dynamics NAV, and we started building interactive Gantt chart solutions for the role-tailored client versions of Microsoft Dynamics NAV. And we started because there was a template, obviously, with the classic client production schedule. We started with building a visual production scheduler, which I talked about in a webinar a month ago, and then earlier last year, and so in April last year, around a year ago, we launched a new product to visually deal with jobs and resource data in NAV, which we call the Visual Job Scheduler, which I will show you in a couple of minutes. And then towards the end of the year, we launched a third product, which we call the Visual Service Scheduler, which I will talk about to you guys in a month from now. So now, what had been a Microsoft feature in the classic client just for production now has become a kind of a strategic product family for a small German company. And so in the last kind of 18 months, we really built what we call the Visual Scheduling Suite, with providing Dynamics NAV users with a suite of scheduling add-ins to deal with production orders and capacities, to deal with service orders and resources, and we talk about this in a month, and what we talk about today, also to visualize, schedule, and control jobs, job tasks, job planning lines, and resources. And so the idea, that we had in mind when we started becoming an Dynamics NAV was really deliver add-in solutions rather than add-on solutions. And what you see here on the chart, this is what we call the add-in principle. So what you see here, this is a fuel injector, and I would assume that everybody of us on a daily basis uses a fuel injector, because we all, I suppose, we all drive a car, and in every car's motor there's a fuel injector. And the fuel injector, it just works, and we as the user of the car, we don't actually care about who built the fuel injector. We just know that it is in the motor and it works and it has an important function to deal there. And so we care about, obviously we care about the car that we drive. Maybe, I don't know, it might be a Ford or might be a Volkswagen or a Mercedes, a BMW. You see, I'm in German, so I'm talking about a lot of German cars. So we care about the cars, but we don't care about the fuel injector provider. And likewise, we see that you as a customer should care about your ERP system. So, and obviously, you made the decision to invest into Microsoft Dynamics NAV, or you will make the decision to invest into Dynamics NAV, which I think is a very good decision if you're a small and medium-sized company. And obviously, you take care for your partners, and you make a good choice to talk about Dynamics NAV with solution systems. And then when you use the product, there are functional gaps in NAV, and in the past customers were kind of asked to use add-on solutions, and these add-on solutions, they complemented the functionality, but they all provided their own user experience. Whereas with an add-in, it is with a fuel injector. You simply should not recognize that it's there because it provides a consistent user experience with the overall systems. And this is really what we are looking at, to provide you with a tool that in an ideal scenario you even don't recognize that this is a third-party solution, but it feels as it would be a natural part of the overall system that you buy. And so this is what we feel with the add-in principle, to provide a consistent user experience, to let you as a user stay in your environment that you purchase and that you work on a daily basis. And the environment that you purchase is an ERP system and not a bunch of add-on solutions that all come with their own user experience. And so, as I told you, we started this kind of new business roughly 2 years ago. And because we are a product company that had been international in the past, we started this also as a kind of international franchise, and we won very good traction with this. So as of today, we kind of have close to 70 resellers in 30 countries on all 5 continents, and obviously for the United States, we partner with solution systems to take our 3 add-ins, the visual production scheduler, the service scheduler, and the job scheduler, to market. And with this as an introduction of who we are and what we do, and also why we do it, I think we should actually look at NAV. And maybe I don't start from here, but maybe so this is what you all know. This is Dynamics NAV, so I'm now working in 2015, but the add-in, the Visual Job Scheduler, also works with the other role-tailored client version, so it also works with NAV 29 R2, with 2013, and with 2013 R2, and it always works in the same kind of way. So when we look at how NAV wants you to plan projects, then you do this with jobs, and you do this with the resource planning, and typically you would start creating a job from here. Then you would see that you have a couple of jobs. They can have a certain status. Of course, a job is associated with a customer, and we can look, and maybe we can look at this one. We can look at the job, at more information, so the billing information. We can do on this job card some kind of time scheduling, so we can say when this job is going to start, when it's going to end. And then in the next step, when we talk about a system implementation for the Canon Group, we can think of, okay, what do we have to do to carry out this job? And this is what where NAV gives you the job task lines, where you can define the structure of the product. And again, NAV wants you to deal with a lot of with a tabular structure, so you can define your job in a tabular structure. You can say, okay, we have a couple of phases for this system implementation. We have a conceptual phase, then followed by the planning phase, and later on we have the execution phase, and there's a closing phase. And then in these phases there may be sub-phases, so the planning phase breaks down into the kickoff phase, into a project plan phase and a design phase and a migration phase. And then these phases again have kind of subtasks, and for these subtasks you actually plan the single activities and the activities and who is going to work on these activities. So for example, for the preparation of the internal kickoff, we can look at the job planning line. So this is drilling a level down, and now you can see that, okay, that in order to do the preparation of the internal kickoff, we need two resources. We need a resource Carl and we need a resource Alan, and obviously we need Carl at that specific day, the 23rd of February, for 4 hours, and then we need Alan on 3 consecutive days, each day 8 hours. So this is the typical way of how Dynamics NAV supports you in planning project work. And now what we do is with our add-in, we kind of communicate with this kind of data, so we don't have our own tables. Everything we do is based on standard NAV, on the standard NAV data model, and what we do is we provide in NAV a graphical interface to this kind of data. So there is no need to export this data into an external system and work with it there, but we give you the opportunity to look at exactly this kind of data in a visual way. So we are now, I move back to the overall jobs menu, and rather than clicking jobs, I click Visual Job Scheduler. Actually here, when I start this, a filter dialog comes up, because we think that especially in professional service type of organizations, there may be 10 project teams, and every team has a project leader or a project planner, project manager, and we feel that every project manager is only interested in his 5 or 10 or 8 or whatever projects, but he's not, or he should not be that interested in the project of all his colleagues. So what we want to avoid is that you start a tool and then look at everybody's data, and then you get overwhelmed by the amount of data that you get seen. But from here you can quickly define a filter to start the visual job scheduler and to start the graphical interface to the data with only those data that is relevant to you. So you could define a filter. Actually, I don't need the filter right now because in my demo environment I only have a controlled number of projects to look at, so I just say cancel, and then our graphical interface to the data that we just looked at opens. So technically what happened is that a Dynamics NAV page opened. You still have what is called in NAV the role center to the left. You have the page-specific menu ribbon on top, and now we look at the same data that we looked before, but we look at it in a graphical way. We see the 5 jobs. We see the information from the job card, when the start date is and when the end date is, and we paint this as this bar here. And we have structured the information a little bit so that you can differentiate, okay, these 2 jobs are ordered, this is what we quoted, and this is what we are currently planning. And then here you see the duration of the job, and you see a time scale. And what you can do here is you can position the mouse wheel on the time scale, and I will do this a couple of times in the demo, and then scroll move the mouse wheel to kind of zoom in or zoom out the data to look at a long time frame or to look at a particular week that you want to schedule. You can also so when we look at this, so I am looking a couple of days back from the current work date and a couple of months into the future. This is 100% customizable. So if you have a shorter planning horizon, you can set this up in a setup menu, and you can even do this as a user. Or if you have a longer planning horizon, then you can define it here. So with this you can also control the amount of data that you visually see, and you can also adapt the screen to whatever your planning preferences are. As this is an add-in, we are kind of tied, or the product is tightly integrated to NAV. This is what I mentioned with the add-in principle, and the idea to provide you with a consistent user experience. So for example, if I double click on a job here, then the NAV job card opens. So there is virtually no new icons, new controls, no new user interface. We always want to give you these we always give you these kind of shortcuts from the visual scheduler into the environment, into the NAV environment that you're used to, or that the solutions people will train you to work on. So as with the fuel injector, we really try to integrate into the system as tight as possible, and to provide this kind of consistent user experience. And then, of course, from here, you now can drill down into the details. So, for example, now we want to work on a job that still is in the planning phase, and we want to see, okay, what is the sequence of the job task, what is the sequence of the job planning lines, will I have issues with the resources? So we are planning a system implementation for the Canon group. This is what we looked at earlier, and so we saw that there was a structure of these phases of the concept, from the conceptual phase to the closing phase. And of course I can drill down here by clicking this triangle. Now I see the phases, and I see with these kind of blue bars here the duration of these phases. And this is now a bar that we actually calculate from the earliest date of the underlying job planning line to the latest date of all underlying job planning lines. And so with the planning phase, we saw that this is structured into a kickoff phase, the project plan phase, the design phase, and the migration phase. And now again, for example, if we are about to plan the kickoffs for this system implementation, we can look into this, and then we see, okay, for this kickoff we need to do the preparation of the internal kickoff. We have the internal kickoff, then there's the preparation of a customer kickoff and the customer kickoff. And this is all, these are all the job tasks that we have defined in NAV, and below you also see the job planning lines with the respective resource allocations. And now the typical scenario, we can now look at this in more detail. And what you see here is that for any job planning line, we have one of these bars. It spans the entire day, and you see with the white number on this bar, you see the amount of hours that had been scheduled for this job planning line. So we see that we need Alan on the 23rd for 8 hours, and we need Carl on the 23rd for 4 hours. So what you see now when I hover with the mouse over a job planning line, you see at the bottom of the screen something which we call a histogram, and the histogram gives you an overview of the overall utilization of the resource. So when I'm now hovering with the mouse over an activity or a job planning line that had been allocated to Alan, I see Alan's histogram at the bottom of the screen. And what the histogram tells me is that in resource planning, I have set up Alan in a way that he works 5 days a week, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that he works 8 hours every day. And so on the weekends, you see this is gray, because he does not work. He works Monday to Friday. And then we see this black line here, which is the available hours of Alan per day. And we see that currently he's nothing to do on Monday, and on Tuesday to Friday he is fully booked, so to speak. Monday, Tuesday also. On Wednesday we gave him some task that takes 4 hours. And when we look at Carl's histogram, so I go with the mouse over an activity that had been allocated to Carl, then I see that here on this Monday we have a resource overload of a couple of hours. So this is kind of information we always provide, and I will look into this into more detail later. So now a typical thing that can happen is that for some reason Alan is not available on this 23rd, so the entire activity starts a day later. So now this would mean in NAV we would have to update job planning lines. So we would say, okay, this will start on the 24th, this one will be on the 25th, and this job planning line will be on the 26th. And now we have moved all of the preparation of the internal kickoff where Alan Jacobson is involved. So what you see is now that when I move these bars, we get this red border. This red border indicates to me as a user that I changed the data, but not yet saved it back to NAV. So if for some reason I'm happy with the changes I made, I can press the Save button. I need to confirm this. And then we do some plausibility checks. Now it went very fast. I get the confirmation that the job schedule had been saved successfully. And then the picture is quickly loaded new. And then you see that the red border had changed because now this data represents the data from the NAV database again. So this is what I said, you don't need to take data out of NAV and put it into an external system like Microsoft Project, because we can look at your project data in NAV in that way. You can drag and drop job planning lines, save it back, and the database is updated. So a couple of things actually that we found pretty unhandy when we started working like this is, you saw that when I wanted to move this activity, the preparation of the internal kickoff where Alan Jacobson is involved, and I wanted to move this by one day, I had to move these 3 individual planning lines. And now for some reason, I assume I can start on the 23rd, I would have to move everything to the left again. And so we give you also the possibility to grab this summary bar and move all of the 3s at once. Then you see 3 times this red border. Now all 3 job planning lines had been changed. I can save this and everything is updated. If the entire activity of the preparation of the internal kickoff for some reason starts later, then I not only can take the summary bar that summarizes Alan Jacobson's job planning lines, but I can also take this blue one, which is the summary of all job planning lines that had been put to the job task preparation of internal kickoff. So I can take this blue bar, and then you see that everything here moves in one row. So now I updated all these 3 job planning lines, and of course you see now at the bottom of the screen that by me doing these random changes I get some warnings in the histogram that we are violating Alan Jacobson's capacity, or that we are requesting from him a lot of overtime and overwork on Monday and Tuesday. So anyway, with me doing these changes, another quite ugly thing actually happened, and this has to do with the fact that standard NAV does not know about dependencies, neither between job planning lines, nor between job tasks, nor between job planning lines and job tasks. So what happened is, with me moving this preparation of the internal kickoff, I de facto made a planning mistake, because we have the preparation of the internal kickoff and we have the internal kickoff, and it's absolutely nonsense that the preparation of the internal kickoff starts or happens after the internal kickoff. So appropriately, it should be like this, that you have the preparation of the internal kickoff, and once you're done with this, the internal kickoff could start. So what we introduced to the Visual Job Scheduler is actually the capability to define dependencies between either job planning lines and other job planning lines, or between job tasks and job planning lines, or between job tasks and job tasks. So in this case, we want to define a dependency between job tasks. So we want to define dependency between the preparation of the internal kickoff and the internal kickoff. And the way of how to define these dependencies is by clicking the right the right mouse, and then you see that you can select between a pointer mode, which is what I have selected and which is by default selected, or a creation mode, a link creation mode. So if I select the link creation mode, then you see that my cursor actually changes. So it changed from the arrow to this little pencil, and with this little pencil I just can draw a line from the preparation of the internal kickoff to the internal kickoff. And so now I defined a dependency between these 2 job tasks. I switch back to the pointer mode, and we can look at all these underlying job planning lines. And now if I move the internal kickoff, then the dependent planning lines, the dependent job task and the respective planning lines, they automatically moved. And now if I would save the data back again, we would also save the information about this link between, or about this dependency between this job task and this job task. You would not see this from the job task card. We save it in a separate database, but whenever you would open the Visual Job Scheduler, you would see this link. And if for some reason also you think, hey, it was a mistake to define this dependency, then you can move to the link, have a right mouse click, delete the link, and the link is gone. And then you can move the job task again independently from each other. So we think actually introducing dependencies to project and jobs planning in Dynamics NAV is quite a useful feature. So this is one view of looking, or one way of looking at your project type of data in NAV, where you look by at your data by the respective jobs, by the job tasks, and by the job planning lines, and then you have the capability to move tasks left and right, to change their timing. The kind of complementary view to this is, and this is also a question that especially project managers have, is, hey, how is my resource load? Where do I have free capacity? Where do I have bottlenecks? We give an initial indication on this question with showing you these, what we call histograms, this capacity load charts at the bottom of the screen. But of course this always is only true for those resource that kind of is tasked with the respective job planning line that I'm working on. Like I showed you, now I'm working on this job task, a job planning line that had been allocated to Alan Jacobson, and then I see Alan Jacobson's histogram at the bottom of the screen. When I'm moving when I'm working on this job task, then I see Carl Simmons' histogram at the bottom of the screen. But from this point of view, which is the very project-centric view, so it is the job view, I don't get the full picture of my resource load. And in order to give you also the complementary picture, not on the jobs, but on the resources, the Visual Job Scheduler comes with a second view. This is the resource view, and this lets you look by all your resources. So this is information we get from resource planning. These are the resource groups. We have a group of project managers, we have a group of consultants, we have a group of system engineers, and there are some resources which had been default in my Cronus database, so we just collected them down here. And then with the project managers, we have 2, and with the consultants we have 3, and there are 2 system engineers. And so now, by doing something like this, we quickly see also by just showing these bars, and the color coding of these bars mirrors the status of the jobs. So this blue means ordered, the orange means quoted, and the brown one means this is still in planning. So this is mirrored here, and from here, just from looking at a picture like this, I even without the histogram at the bottom of the screen, I see where I have free capacities and where I'm getting a bottleneck. So if you see here, David has nothing to do in week 11, but we see that he has big overload in this week because we see this job planning lines with 8 hours allocation stacked on these days. What you can do with the Visual Job Scheduler, and you can do it on this view and on the other view, you can print anything you see on the screen. So we have a print preview actually that makes a suggestion of how to distribute the amount of data that you see on a couple of sheets. But if you don't want to have the distribution, you can fit it to page. Maybe that you now see don't see the forest or the trees, because there's a lot of information. Remember, this is a half-year's time frame we look at. But you can also set this up and say, okay, now I'm planning my resources for whatever the month of February. So I want to look only at data for the month of February. And this works as it is expected to work. You can apply this. You can fit this again to page. And now I see the schedule for my resources for this specific month. I can print this, or I can save this as a PDF and share with my colleagues. So this is standard functionality, and this applies, by the way, to both views. When we looked, or one thing which goes without the saying, if we have a situation like here, where on this particular Friday we have an overload at Alan Jacobson. So Alan is tasked at doing these two jobs, or these should be tasked doing these two jobs at the same time. If we would win those jobs that are quoted on plan, and obviously, I mean, either we could ask him to work 16 hours this day, or we need to figure out a different solution. So what we first can do is look, kind of drill down here and look what kind of projects these are. And then when we think that we would need to carry out both tasks at this particular day, and if we see that another consultant has free capacity at that day, we can just take a job from here and move it from Alan to David, and so reallocate the job planning line from one resource to another. So this is standard functionality. Like in the other view, we had the capability to move things left and right to change their timing, and here we can do this vertical movements and move a job planning line from one resource to another. When we were talking about the jobs view, I showed you how we actually implemented the functionality of links, which of the dependencies between job tasks or job planning lines, which is an enhancement to standard NAV functionality. What we actually also found quite well missing in NAV is that you don't have the capability to plan job tasks or job planning lines on group level. So when we spoke to our customers and when we discussed this kind of product with them, we learned that actually a lot of customers kind of differentiate between the short-term and the mid-term planning. And whereas in the short-term planning, they actually want to decide that, okay, this task needs to be done by David, whereas this job needs to be taken care of by Paul. But when they do mid-term planning, they actually would prefer to have a scenario like this, where they say, okay, in May here or in March, we will have a couple of activities, and we know that they need to be taken care of by a consultant, but honestly, right now, I don't care if this consultant should be Alan, David, or Paul. We just know that these activities require a consultant. So what we introduced is a specific resource, and this is what we call the unassigned tasks, and we have defined a prefix that you need to give this specific resource so that it shows up as a resource, and then you can collect these kind of tasks with the unassigned tasks. So these are unassigned tasks of consultants, and the good thing about this is now we have defined these unassigned tasks to be taken care of in this particular week. And now if you hover with the mouse over the consultant and look at the histograms of the consultants, it shows us the capacity need that we have in this particular week. So you see we have 3 consultants. We have Alan, we have David, and Paul. They have been set up in a way that any of them works 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. So we have a total capacity of 24 hours a day. And now we see from here that actually a plan like this would work in this group because we have enough free capacity here. So now with introducing these unassigned tasks, we can also plan job planning lines or job tasks on a group level. When we do kind of the rough planning and then we do the fine planning, we can reassign this from this unassigned task group to a specific resource. What we also think is that, or what we feel is that, as I said, this is the rough planning, and for me as a planner, I would like to know that at some point of time I need to do the fine planning. So we introduced this red box here. So whenever we have unassigned tasks, it is red, and it gives you actually the figure of the number of unassigned tasks that you have. So as a planner, I always know, hey, Martin, I know that I have some tasks that I have just planned on group level, but not on resource level. And at some point of time, of course, I will need to do this exercise and decide, okay, this task needs to be done by Paul, this by Alan, and so on and so forth. So this is actually another enhancement that we bring to NAV with the Visual Job Scheduler, is that we provide you the capability to also plan jobs and job tasks on a group level when you do the rough planning, and then later on do this drag and drop from the group level to the resource level. Last but not least, and this is an addition we just finalized to the product. Let me see. Yeah, when we look at the way of how NAV typically is built, then you always have to do one job planning line per day. So which means, like we had it before, we had the preparation of the internal kickoff, and we needed Alan Jacobson on 3 consecutive days. So we had 3 job planning lines, and each job planning line with an allocation of 8 hours for this specific day. And we know from talking to partners and customers that this really can lead to an explosion of job planning lines, and which makes things quite unhandy. So actually, when you look at this one here, we have a bar that spans 3 days, and it has an allocation of 20 hours. So when we look at this in NAV, we see that we have one job planning line. It says we need Alan Jacobson for furniture assembly, and we need him for 20 hours. So we allow you to define job planning lines like this, that we can say, okay, we have this activity, we need this person, it should start at that date, and we should it should take 20 hours. And now if I move this, it is moved like this, and we also take into account that if there is a weekend in between, let's see, yeah, then it automatically gets longer, so it starts on Friday 8 hours, and then continues on Monday with 8 hours, and has 4 hours here on Tuesday. And you see at the bottom of the screen, the histogram always takes into account the resource load per day. So although the job planning line says, hey, we need him on the 29th for 20 hours, the histogram reflects actually at the bottom of the screen the appropriate capacity load. So he's booked 8 hours on the Monday, 8 hours on Tuesday, and 4 hours on Wednesday. And likewise is, and I think this is the last thing I want to show you here is, hang on, we have an unassigned task here. It says, hey, this should take 40 hours. So let's look at this again. We have an unassigned task here, and it should take 40 hours. And because we don't know, it sits on the unassigned task. We don't know to whom it will be assigned, so we don't know yet what the capacity of the person is. So if it is assigned to a person who has who works 5 days a week, 8 hours, this will be a 5 days task. But if this is assigned to a person who only works 4 hours a day, it will be a 2 weeks task. So as we don't know this, as long as this sits in the unassigned task, we just show it at that day when it should start, and we show the overall allocation. But now if I move this from the unassigned task to Alan, who works 5 days, 8 hours, you see we get it automatically spans now the entire time, and it also shows you the appropriate resource load that this kind of job planning line generates with Alan. So you see that now that I moved it from the unassigned tasks, where it's adhered to Alan Jacobson, you see that, okay, with this we virtually fully book Alan Jacobson for this week, and we have no spare capacity left with him. And with this, I think I want to conclude my presentation. Maybe we switch back to the slides. So why do we think that visual jobs planning makes sense? We feel it helps you increase your operational agility. We as NETRONIC, we do this kind of technology for a really long time. We love Gantt charts. We have been doing this for the last 25 years. We are experienced with what we do. We're a financially sound company, and we feel that providing a job scheduler as an add-in brings a couple of advantages to you as a customers. You don't have to take data out of NAV and move it back and forth and have it not integrated. But with the visual job scheduler, it is a little bit like with my fuel injector. It becomes really an integrated functionality in Dynamics NAV, and you will stay in the environment that you are used to work with. What we provide is based on Dynamics NAV standard, so that there should be actually no big ramp-up time. So the marketing statement is typically don't have, but just it is it will produce a visual value virtually from day one, that you look at the data in the way that I showed you. And of course, we started complementing Dynamics NAV with a couple of features that we feel that are missing really to consistently manage projects. And with this, let me thank you very much for your kind attention. And of course, if you have any questions, please talk to the people at Solution Systems. They will help you to learn more. And if you have individual questions where you want to have some in-depth advice or experience, then also we can do a one-to-one sessions with you, with the folks at Solution Systems, with us. But we are really thankful to have a partner like Solution Systems to help bringing these solutions to market in North America. So thank you very much. And with this, I would say, Michael, back to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin. We're also very thankful to be working with you as well. I'm going to put my contact information up on the screen, and then if anybody's got any questions or whatnot, or wants to see a more in-depth demo, more than welcome to get a hold of us. Once again, I'd like to thank Dr. Martin for the presentation. It was wonderful, and thanks a lot. Have a great day.